Guys, what's happening, people? Welcome to United Central. Back with another video. I'm with my guy, Mr. Sam, the plug, aka who knows everything in world football, the genius. Listen, man, people have been applauding you, Mr. Sam. How you been, man? How's it going right now?
All good, man. All good. I think considering everything that's going on, I'm happy, healthy, safe, I guess. You know, there's lots going down in the world right now. You know,
Oh,
big plaudits out to our NHS staff and doctors on the front line helping to save lives. And of course, difficult times by the families who've had people lost, loved ones, and this illness isn't wasting time, man. It's pretty ruthless. So yeah, considering everything, I think we're all blessed if we're safe and healthy at home, and otherwise just trying to keep busy with all the news that's going on. And no football is always depressing times, right?
Yeah, major depressing. Obviously, you're a busy man. You know what I mean. You're going around parts of the world. How's it been for you just to be indoors and working from home?
Yeah, well, not easy being grounded. That's the word I use. I call it grounded. This is probably the longest time I've actually been grounded, as in I've not taken a flight to travel somewhere. I'm usually out somewhere in the world at least once every month. So yeah, it's been, I think 2 or 3 trips already cancelled since we've been locked down. So it's been challenging, but everything can be overcome, technology and that sort of thing. But I do miss obviously going to exotic parts of the world and doing my thing. So yeah, of course it's not easy, and I don't know how it's going to change in the next few months either. So trying to plan for the world after all of this, man.
Well, if there's one thing after this, everyone's going to be very, very grateful for the small things in life, and social interaction, and basically just enjoying people's other companies. I think that's going to be one thing we're all gonna make sure we strive for. And but I just wanted to start off really on the Premier League side of it, and obviously no Premier League football. The question of it, is it going to be void? Is it going to be still continuing? To my opinion, I've said it's going to be voided because of the fact that it's very, very mathematically, it's just not going to happen. The staffing, you know what I mean, in terms of people going in around the stadium. One club says, "Oh, you know what? We've got a player who's got symptoms," then they have to cancel. So I don't know. For me, everything doesn't. All the mitigating circumstances doesn't add up for me. To your opinion, obviously we've only spoken now and whatnot. What do you think? Do you think the Premier League will be voided, or do you still think sponsorship deals, the Premier League being so much more money, the biggest, club football in the world, really? What's your opinion?
So it's quite a complex situation, really. It's, as they've said previously, unprecedented times for the world, not just football. So I think, well, I guess I should start off with the real-time facts. The Premier League met today in their offices. Well, I say in their offices.
They didn't really say anything, though, did they?
They didn't really make any decisions. I think what came out of it, if anyone's read or heard the reports, is that basically the intent from all of the clubs is still to continue or finish the season. And that was it pretty much that came out of today's meetings. These would be virtual meetings. So I think I've explained previously on the podcast that I've been on. It's an area that I know very well. And how does the Premier League actually work? How does it work, right? So as you know, the Premier League's a company, and it's set up in a very interesting way. Its charter is that basically 20 clubs own the Premier League. Premier League is not owned by anyone really. So the clubs that revolve within it, when I say revolve, it's because 3 clubs leave every year, 3 clubs come in, right? Promotion and relegation. So the 20 clubs pretty much have a say in how and what the Premier League does. Of course, as a body, as an entity, it has its own rules and structures and mandates for how it operates. But ultimately, the bigger decision making whenever there's large and big decisions, the members of the Premier League are actually the football clubs. So whenever they say the Premier League's meeting, what they're basically saying is that the representatives of each member club are on these meetings, and then basically they discuss anything that affects the league. So as you know, this is probably, I think, the third or the fourth meeting that they've had. The first meeting was, of course, when they first stopped the matches. Then they did a second update to say that the suspension would be extended, I guess, to the end of April, which is 2 weeks from today. And I think they've met in between as well, but I can't remember what the
I think it was to say basically, if we have the chance to play in the Premier League, we will play it.
Yes,
I think that was another
day. That's exactly it. They basically decided that they would amend a rule in the Premier League rules to extend the league indefinitely, right? And because within the rules of the Premier League, it basically suggested that the league always had to finish by June, basically 30th May or June. So that gave the opportunity for players and clubs to do whatever they did, to have their holidays, to go on to international tournaments and what. So the meeting today was pretty inconclusive, really. I think they were probably discussing the ramifications of the current additional 3 weeks that the government has implemented. They were probably discussing the concept of, if the lockdown is reviewed by government, how would the Premier League continue? Because I don't think social distancing as a concept is gonna go away. So they were probably discussing how football would work under lockdown, so social distancing rules, basically. And that, I guess, very, 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 very easily said, is pretty much hosting or playing out the remaining fixtures in empty stadiums. So behind closed doors matches. Now, the question is, I always say this, what makes the Premier League, and I've always said it, what makes the Premier League is the fans, right? The atmosphere, everything. It's about the whole match day atmosphere, people going to the games, the chanting inside, the sound.
It's a full package, isn't it?
Yeah, you can never replicate that. It just, the magic of the Premier League, of any football match, would not be the same without the fan atmosphere that's created within the stadium. Now, that's not to say that they can't play football games behind closed doors, because they can. You just notice the difference, right? So I guess when you think about the merits and the justifications for trying to finish the league, it's probably a combination of the commercial reasons and a combination of the concept of merit, basically. And the concept of merit being someone has to win, someone has to lose, right? To kind of be in a position where people are kind of in this limbo state where you're, 10 games from the end, so it's almost 75% complete, right? Their options obviously are to complete the league, play the remaining games, be it behind closed doors, or allow fans back into the stadiums, which I think is pretty slim at this moment, given how things are going. The other option is to call the end of the league. So calling the end of the league would be to say the league has terminated on where it's at, basically, right? So
do you see that happening, or do you think who needs it more? Who needs it more to be still on, the Premier League or clubs, in terms of financially?
I'll come back to the Premier League as the entity that it is, right? The Premier League doesn't gain or lose out of this. It's the clubs that gain or lose, because all the money that comes out of the media revenue, because in essence, remember, Sky Sports will pay. They're the major rights buyers, TV rights buyers from the Premier League. They pay the biggest amount. They basically will pay the Premier League. The Premier League then distributes that money to the rest of the teams, right? One thing we never discussed previously was how these monies get paid as well. So the money doesn't get paid in one big lump sum. So as in it gets paid in stages. So the last payment would still be due. The last payment would still be due. So a lot of these clubs did not receive that payment and won't receive that payment if these games aren't played. It's kind of like what you call a staged-based payments. You pay 25% of the league, you get 25% of the payment. And that's how it goes, basically. So the concept of how the payments are made is based on stages. And so this last part hasn't been paid. So the question is, whose interest is it in? Is it the Premier Leagues or the clubs? It's one and the same, because the Premier League are the clubs, right? So it is in the interest of the clubs to get this money. Larger clubs with
valuable money as well.
Larger clubs with good money would not have an issue. Manchester United being one of them. You know, we as a club, Manchester United are pretty cash rich, liquid. So there's enough money there in the reserves to continue paying players, paying the staff, and keeping the overheads going, right? But then if you look at some of the smaller clubs, their business model is based on these media rights payments. So it is their interest to get these payments, okay? Now, the question of what are the losses, I guess, for these clubs as well is not just the media rights. It's also the gate takings. If you're a season ticket holder, you're going to be asking, am I going to be paid my money back for the remaining games that you haven't? I think a lot of clubs are already looking at that. How do they reimburse, compensate fans for the unpaid, the unplayed games? So yeah, I think it's difficult times for the finance people within football clubs. They're probably working their cash flows and looking at their revenue model for the next months to see how they can sustain themselves. But what it really comes down to is the wealthier clubs. Now I'm talking, when I say the wealthy clubs, I'm talking Man City, Manchester United, Liverpool to a certain degree, Arsenal. These are clubs backed by huge conglomerates, wealthy billionaires, right? So they'll be fine. Spurs is in a precarious position. They've just built a brand new stadium, so they've got payments to be made to the bank, interest, all these kinds of things. So whilst they have big backing and they seem to appear like a big club, they, I think, could be in trouble financially.
But are they not the seventh richest club in the world? Richest club in the world? Tottenham.
No, they're not. No,
they're not. Right. Okay. No, I thought I'd seen something.
No,
richest club in the world.
No, they're not. Because if you think of it, if you just look at Real Madrid and Barcelona, that's 2. Then you look at Bayern Munich and Juventus, that's 3 and 4. Man United. I'm not ranking them. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Spurs would struggle to get into 7 because there's clubs with bigger backing. You know, PSG is when you say rich, are you talking about how much money they have or their value?
Yeah, they know how much money they have in terms of billionaire owners and obviously.
Yeah, then you would look at the value basically, and I think in terms of value, like they wouldn't come anywhere close to 7. I think they'll be probably in the top 10, maybe top 15. Yeah. But it goes up and down every single year, right? So I guess coming back to the question, what do they do? Do they finish the league?
Surely they have to. As much as we love Liverpool not to win the league and whatnot, surely the football has to continue because at the end of the day, there's so much riding on the sponsorship deals, you know, all these mitigating circumstances where people want their money. Everyone's craving their money. Everyone's like, yo, I need my piece. I need my piece of cake.
Yeah, but you know, the thing is, like, as I say, we're in unprecedented times. We've never been here before, right? I think probably the only other time that this sort of thing would have happened when we were in world wars, basically. So that, you know, we're talking 1940s was the last time, right? That, you know, leagues had to be suspended, players were going into military service, right? So this has not happened for a very, very long time where the leagues had to be suspended. However, you know, the question of we have to finish the league, we have to finish. No, we don't have to finish the league. We don't have to finish the league because what could be done as an option, and this is my theory, you could easily void the league and say it never happened. Now, that will be a bad thing.
You can say that to Liverpool fans.
Yeah, of course, they're not going to like me for saying this, but it is definitely one of the genuinely feasible options on the table, right? You can say the league never happened and consider that the action that we saw for 75% of the season, right, was a bonus. We got it for free, basically, right? We got it for free, but it never happened from a results perspective. And the reason why I think finishing the season, completing it, or should I say, so I guess let me go quickly through the options. My mind's jumping here. There's lots of thoughts, right? So first, finish the season, play the games out. Second, call an end to the season and award the final positions as it were, but no further games are played, right? Not a great option. And another option is, I guess, void the entire season. Call it over. Say it never happened, basically. Null and void, meaning it never happened. None of the results would stand, okay? Now, of the three options, most people would want the league to continue because we want the excitement. We want the teams, the clubs, because there's money involved. So I guess it's option number one. It is the one on the table. It's the best option on the table. What is the fallback option if this can't happen? And I think we're very close to it, because if you think about it, right, we're 17th of April today. The government has 3 weeks of a lockdown that takes us to the end of the first week of May, right?
They need a pre-season.
Yeah, it basically nothing's the same again, So we have to. The Premier League needs to consider whether to extend this season indefinitely, meaning take it into what would have been the start of the new season, August, September. But then all that does is it starts to push out the season, right? Meaning,
and then you've got Euros coming up as well.
Exactly. So 2021, as we know, UEFA have moved. I had tickets for quite a few games. It's been moved now to 2021, right? I don't even know if I can make those games anymore. But the point being is, there's the solution of pushing this season forward doesn't necessarily change anything, because all it does is it pushes the problem further out, right? However, if they can do it and still give the players enough time to rest, we can talk about rest, but because imagine they play these last few games quite intensely. It would be a game almost every other day. But I forget that. I think for me, the biggest problem with continuing the league right now, because of the time length that has passed since we suspended the league, was I look at it from this, right? Pretty much every team will be back on a level footing. And I'll tell you why. Because in football, in sport, time is everything. Players
mentally as well.
Anyone, mentality, physicality, everything, right? For example, I recall Spurs had quite a lot of injuries. Yeah, a lot of teams had injuries. Some players were on top form. Man United's a perfect example. We were in top form. We were on a roll, basically. Okay. Yeah. We were on a serious roll with form, and potentially this could have impacted our top four potential. Liverpool, on the other hand, weren't having a great time. They weren't having a great time. They lost and drew. They were struggling to win a few games.
Yeah. Even though they are 20-something points.
Even though they're 25 points ahead, which is, I guess, the only thing that makes this decision a bit more controversial is the fact that they are so far ahead. We wouldn't
if it wasn't,
if we wouldn't even be thinking about this if they were 8 or 9 points ahead, even, because with 9 games to go, we all know that 9 games is not 9 points is not an insurmountable number of points to come back, right? So just because they're so far ahead and they're literally 2 games from winning, that's what would make voiding the season controversial. But it still is a plausible one.
What do you want to happen?
I want it to be voided. I'm a Man United fan, right?
So all that in a nutshell.
Because I tell you why. A lot of people are saying I think there's been a few articles, a few analyses, a few debates about who wins and who loses from the season being null and voided. And I think they said Man United would be a loser in that situation. Reason being is because They looked at the existence.
Europa League.
Back to Europa League. So 1 year again in Europa League. But there was no guarantee we were going to get into Champions League anyway, right? There was no guarantee that was going to happen. So I don't see that as a lost position. I see it's just, hey, it's 1 more year of the same thing. But why I see it's a gain for Man United is because it gives us 1 more transfer window, 2 transfer windows for Ole if he stays in the job, which I think he will now, given everything that's going on.
Wow.
I think it will give him 2 further windows without there being a new Champions League winner or a new Premier League winner. Because if they avoid the season, there'll be no winner for this year. It's as if it never happened. But it does give you the benefit of 2 further seasons, meaning
that means the pressure's on more. Pressure's on more as well.
The pressure will be on naturally, but the point is that we're 1 year further ahead without losing our result position. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's not like Man City or Liverpool have won a league and we didn't win anything because nobody won anything. However, gives us 2 transfer windows to buy new players, new talent, which will get us closer, 1 year closer to potentially challenging for the title without having lost ground on any other of the potential rivals, right? So that's the other thing. I think Liverpool obviously feel really aggrieved at Liverpool. I know they've been waiting for 30 years. A lot of my mates are Liverpool fans. They would absolutely love it. But as much as they are hardcore Liverpool fans, they're resigning.
Unprecedented times.
Yeah, they're resigning themselves to the fact that if it happens, it happens. One of those things. If they were that good, they should be able to replicate it.
Like Sadio Mane said. I just want to, obviously, we're talking about the Premier League and whatnot, and crazy news in the last couple of days has just been released. Newcastle Football Club, Mike Ashley is apparently letting go, finally, of this football club. And funny enough, we've been talking about the Saudi owners. The same Saudi owners are about to, and I don't know whether we're going to talk about how far are they in advanced talks and whereabouts are they in there, but the same owners that Man United, they were interested in Man United, and now about to buy Newcastle Football Club. And I mean, Newcastle Football Club, just to start off with, very, very good fan base. I mean, they were there 52,000 to every game when they were in the Championship. They have a massive, it's a city where it's full of football, Gascoigne and all that, it's rich in history of football. You know what I mean? You've got hardcore fans, you've got people that come in every week. It's packed out, 52,000. If you were to put in money into that football club, you know what? It's a very, very, very good long-term project with Newcastle Football Club. But how has this happened from Man United to Newcastle?
Yeah, I think, as you say, rightfully so, I think it's an amazing project for them. Your question is, how did it go from Man United to Newcastle? Very easy. I think, in the world of business, it's all about value and money, right? The Saudis had the money to buy Man United. They were very interested and are still interested in Manchester United. However, the Glazers' unwillingness to budge on their valuation was a turnoff, was a put out, right? So you can go and look at it from two different angles. The first angle is you buy a trophy asset, and that's what Man United was going to be for them, a trophy asset, right? It's a risk because you would probably pay a bit more and over the odds to buy a trophy asset. Usually that's how it works. Now, given the struggles and the hurdles they've been having and trying to even get close to getting the Glazers to agree a deal, it obviously becomes frustrating after a while. You keep asking, and you keep being rejected for the valuation, or you keep being given a valuation that makes
so much you can do.
Absolutely no sense, right? So the next thing, I guess, as an investor, as a business person, you would consider is like, okay, I really want a footprint in the Premier League, right? Where else do I go? Okay, and you would go immediately to clubs that have willing sellers as owners, basically, right? Which clubs have owners who are going to be willing sellers? Now, if you look through the list, there weren't many clubs that had willing sellers. Now, Man City, the Abu Dhabi family are not going to exit that. Liverpool are owned by Fenway Sports Group. They're not going to exit that anytime soon unless they get, again, some ridiculous valuation.
Okay.
And Arsenal never, not going to happen. Spurs, Daniel Levy is a really shrewd guy. That's not going to happen. So where else do you go? Where else do you go?
Yeah.
Not Watford. You're not going to take a Watford. There's no all due respect to
resale value.
Watford. There's no legacy there, right? Whereas Newcastle has some form of legacy in the sense that they've always had really decent players come through it. As you mentioned, Gasco and Alan Shearer, loads of players have played for Newcastle. Not only that, I think the city is a football city. It's a football mad place, right? So if you are going to invest into a project, which is what the Saudis are going to do here, you'd rather do it in a place where you know football is everything to these people. And they are crazy about this club. Win or lose, they were there. You've said it, right?
Play to them, yeah.
I have a lot of friends and mates who are basically Newcastle fans, and you know it hurt them to be doing so poorly in the last years under Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley is a businessman. Again, let's make no mistake.
Doesn't care about the football.
He didn't really care. You know, we always talk about foreign owners not caring about football. You know, Mike Ashley is a British owner. He's a British person owning a football club in the UK. Did he care about the football? He turned up. I think he likes football, but did he really care about the passion of the fans and trying to sort things out? Maybe he did, but I just don't get the sense that he tried hard enough to do what he needed to do, you know, at the club. And ultimately, in a club that's struggling, you need to kind of really back your managers, back your players, back the club with money. And I think he got to a point where he just wasn't putting the money in. So it's really, really difficult. However, what I have to say is I think the Saudis made a really shrewd investment. For 300 million, or that's
300 million only.
Yeah, that's the money that they've touted. Well, let's not make any mistakes. Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea for over 90 million, just about 100 and something million.
Yeah.
Of course, Chelsea had some debt and all those sorts of things, but he didn't pay a lot. I mean, okay, it was a long time ago, but still, you know, now you look at Chelsea, they're probably worth.
Why Newcastle though? Why Newcastle? Who's touted it for Newcastle? Why did they think, you know what, let's go for Newcastle?
Because again, it comes down to the availability. You have to understand that owning a Premier League club is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing, especially one that has a bit of reputation and a bit of a legacy, you know. So getting to any club is not an easy thing. Like, you really have to come in with serious money to be able to start even having a conversation. Now, everybody knows that Mike Ashley was definitely despondent and kind of lost interest, I guess, complacent in his ownership of Newcastle. So it was the prime alternative to kind of go out and, you know, make an offer. As you know, he tried selling it to another group a few months ago. That failed.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Amanda Staveley, if you don't know who Amanda Staveley is, you should check her out. Amanda Staveley is basically financier, wheeler, dealer, connector, businesswoman. She has her own corporate finance business. She connects opportunities with money. Usually the money, when I talk about, from ultra high net worth families and sovereign funds. She did assisted Man City in that acquisition with the Derby family. She basically brought Qatari money into Barclays Bank. You know, she's really, really well connected into the wealth of the Middle East. So it makes only sense that she would have touted Newcastle to a few of those families. You know, the United Arab Emirates couldn't really buy into another Premier League team because Abu Dhabi owns a team. They would have struggled to get through the ownership test. Qatar could buy into the Premier League without problems. And naturally, then who would next be? It would be Saudi Arabia, right? So Saudi Arabia have been looking to buy a football asset, that's for sure. I know that for a fact. 3-4 years now, they have been looking to acquire a football asset. Unfortunately, it wasn't Man United. I would have loved for them to take Man United. But, sorry,
do you think they're
point.
Sorry, go on.
The last point, they wanted to buy Man United, but what I'm seeing with the Newcastle transaction is that a lot of people are saying that, it's sport washing. I don't know if you've heard this term before. It's sport washing. So Saudi Arabia has a bad reputation for human rights and other, as perceived the Western media, right? Women's rights, human rights, and all the things they've done controversially, rightfully or wrongfully, over the last few years. Everyone's fully aware of this, right? So people are now saying that the Newcastle deal is Saudi Arabia's way to sport wash, to use sport as a way to kind of cover up their human rights record and all the other things. Look, they're always going to be haters, if you know, right? But the question is, was that not possibly a reason why the Glazers or other people within the management of Manchester United turned down or were ridiculous in their evaluations about Manchester United? Because let's be frank here, Man United is a massive, massive, massive global brand. Question is, did they want to be associated with the potential for sport washing? Did they want?
Is that money not money though? It's money not money though. In terms of if United were to get the right price, would they not say, what?
Money is money. Yes, I don't care where it comes from. Of course, I do care where it comes from. But when someone's putting money on the table, so long as there's no blood on that money, I think it's fine, right? We all know where the money of Saudi Arabia comes from. It comes from their oil, right? So they're not stealing the money. They're not kind of killing people for their money. They are killing people, rightfully or wrongfully, in wars and other situations. But the point being is that they have a right to do what they want. If that is to buy into a football club, they should be able to do that. And I think you'll have critics who will say that Saudi Arabia are using sport to kind of blindside the Western world as to their integrity and human rights record. That's the Western media's opinion of things. I think Saudi Arabia has every right, like any other nation or any other investor or person from around the world who's got the money to buy in and invest into anything that they want to. So I can't see why that's a problem. What I don't understand, what doesn't make any sense, is every single day the Western world buys Saudi Arabian oil. So why don't we stop buying their oil? Why don't we stop driving cars so we don't have to use their oil? So what I'm trying to do here is take a balanced view, right? I'm not trying to say what is right and what is wrong, but the point is that I think it's just jealousy or envy that the Saudi Arabians are finally entering into the market, and potentially what it may mean for the rest of the Premier League clubs, because Newcastle could be a serious contender.
That's what I wanted to talk about. How serious do you think Newcastle fans should be excited by this now?
Absolutely. If I were a Newcastle fan, and I know for a fact the Saudi public investment fund, they're not doing this just because they want to own an asset worth 300 million. They're doing this to create excitement within their population of young Saudi Arabians. They want their local youth to be excited about an asset that they own. I wouldn't be surprised when I go to Riyadh or Jeddah in the next months when this lockdown's over.
Newcastle flags everywhere.
Newcastle everywhere, black and white. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. So the thing is, Saudi people are crazy about football, just like most people around the world are crazy about football, and they love the Premier League. So I don't care whether you are a Man United fan or a Man City fan or an Arsenal fan. Your second team or maybe your first team is now going to be Newcastle, because your country owns this. So
you say Kylian Mbappe will be at Newcastle next season?
No.
That's a dream. That's a dream.
You're being very fanatical there. That's the word.
Fanatical, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to come back onto Manchester United, and I want to say to myself, I'm kind of sad at the minute because I feel like we missed out on an opportunity to maybe, I don't know, like get rid of all the Glazers of what they've done to the football club in terms of they've never ever really used their money to invest in a football club. You know what I mean? They've used the money from, the sponsorships and whatnot, and everything that's included with Man United's actual revenue. How do you think Man United fans should be disappointed, or do you just think that what, Glazers are just invincible? They've got the club where they want now, and unless a financial storm, or United are just imperilous and they don't go into Champions Leagues and they become no value, that's when they only will sell the club.
Yeah, so I don't think we should be disappointed at all. I think, of course, I know people have disgruntlement against the Glazers, and rightfully so. The Glazers haven't had a great record for investing into Manchester United, but I think what's to say is that it's not the end of the road, because there are other very high net worth, ultra high net worth entities, people who could pay 3 billion quite easily. Elon Musk.
They won 5 billion. They won 5 billion though.
Elon Musk could buy Manchester United. Jeff Bezos, you buy your Amazon things from Jeff, keep supporting him. He could buy Manchester United. So there are loads of people who could buy Man United. Don't get despondent that Saudis were the only people to buy Manchester United. The thing, I guess, that is disappointing is we know that if Saudi Arabia did buy Manchester United, we know their ambition. Their ambition is to be number one. And they would have done every single thing to put billions into the club to kind of get it to where it should be, including possibly making Old Trafford, what it used to be, in terms, fortress. But not only that, we talk about fortress, but also improving the stadium, making the infrastructure better, right? The stadium is so old. It's Old Trafford. It's old. It needs to be. You look at Spurs has an amazing stadium, right? Spurs has an amazing stadium. Arsenal have an amazing stadium. West Ham are playing in an awesome stadium.
Yeah.
Manchester United, a club of their significance, should have a beautiful stadium as well. Nothing wrong with Old Trafford. It's an amazing place, but the infrastructure needs to come up to speed with the 21st century, right? Loads of things, could have changed with Saudi investment. That being said, as I said, anything's possible. The Qataris could easily buy into us. They've got billions to spare. Dubai, I wonder if Dubai could buy into Manchester United, given Abu Dhabi owns Manchester City. So what I'm saying is that there's adequate possibilities for the future to, bring up another potential takeover of Manchester United. We just have to wait and see. But one thing for sure is that now, if this deal goes through, because they're still doing the due diligence from the Premier League.
How close is it?
So the deal's agreed in principle. The Premier League has to do their checks. It's called the owners and directors check, and that basically is to make sure that you haven't stolen the money. It's not coming from a dark place. The company or the entity that's buying the club has a reputable standing, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole list. I don't want to bore people with the due diligence side of things, but it's an important part, because the Premier League wants to ensure that whoever's taking over ownership of this club can afford to own this club. They can afford to keep it going, and they won't mismanage it. And then you have another club that goes into administration or insolvent, and then it's a bad thing for the league if a club has to go into administration, like Portsmouth did a few years back.
Yeah, so of course.
You need to, it's a serious and important part of the transaction. There were reports that there may be some issues with this check, because Saudi Arabia was accused of some copyright issues, piracy issues, stealing content, Premier League content and football content from beIN Sports, which is a Qatari-owned media company. And so I think there was some dispute there. I don't think that's really going to affect anything. The fact is, money's on the table. These guys are ready to move. The deal's been agreed in principle. They probably have a good business plan to take this thing forward. They have the money to push forward. Everyone knows Saudi Arabia's got the money, right?
So you're telling me Man United, Saudis, end interest in Man United?
That's what I'm saying, because as soon as you buy one club, you can't own another, and yeah, it's the end of the road for Saudi Arabia unless they go on to sell Newcastle further down the line. There's no possibility that Saudi Arabia as an entity can buy into another Premier League club. Now, that's not to say another Saudi individual, a person in Saudi Arabia, right?
Nice.
Yeah,
We've took our chance and we've shot it.
So what this is the complexity of this ownership and directorship test, right? The complexity is they want to make sure that you're not, whoever's buying the club is not connected to someone who already owns another club.
Yeah.
So the problem in Saudi is that if you're a very high net worth prince, right, they'll say immediately, oh, but your family, you're part of the Saudi royal family, and therefore because you guys are in essence connected, right? It's like you and your third cousin owning two clubs in a football club, in a football league. They don't allow it because of the potential for conflict of interest. Those two football clubs play. You tell your cousin, hey mate, we need to play a draw out here because it works for both of us. That's what
exactly
it's all about, right? So in essence, Saudi Arabia buying Newcastle means Manchester United deal is off the table for good until they can do it, or they can front it through someone else. If that's
bad, man.
Possible.
We've ruined our chance, Sam. The Glazers are invincible now. They're invincible now.
Nah. I'm still hopeful, man. I look. I think it would have been amazing if they did the deal. I think everyone, like a lot of people, were hoping that there was new ownership at Manchester United. But I think, we just have to be positive. We just have to be hopeful that something else will come up.
I'm talking about hopeful. You know what I mean? I just wanted to end on like transfers, and I know it's a very very insensitive topic to talk about with the times and the unprecedented times at the minute. But we've been linked with wholesale names. The biggest one out of all of them is Sancho. I know you said Man United still have money in the stock, but to fork out 120 million, 150 million, would the Premier League allow that to happen in terms of what's happening right now? Would there be a kind of a transfer budget for every Premier League club? And do you think Man United have the money to buy Sancho this summer, or big names for this club for this summer?
So I guess what I want to say first, I think you asked a few questions in one there. So the first question is, will the Premier League put any form of restrictions in terms of transfer budgets that clubs spend during the transfer window? The first question is, when is the transfer window actually going to start from?
Well,
we didn't even talk about that, right? That's for another day. But
if the season's voided, let's say in May the season says, you know what, we're not doing the Premier League.
Right, then the transfer window will start immediately, as it usually does. That's not to stop clubs from making pre-contractual arrangements and agreements with players, right? So the transfer window is simply the period during which clubs are allowed and able to register a player on their books, right? But just the transfer window doesn't mean to say you can't speak to another player and agree terms with them. You probably hear this all the time during the middle of a season, that this player has agreed terms.
Principle agreement.
So agreement in principle. So a lot of deals are done. But remember, again, that this only happens by both clubs being in contact with each other. So it can't be done by, I can't come to you whilst you're still a Man United player. You don't tell Manchester United and I start talking to another club. You can't do that. No. Your club will be really upset with you. It would be a serious breach of goodwill, not contract, of goodwill. Clubs agree to not speak to each other's players without speaking directly. So, for example, if Man United are interested in Jordan Sancho, basically they would go to Borussia Dortmund and say, look, we're interested in Sancho for the summer. What do you think? And Borussia Dortmund would probably say yes. If you pay the right money, we're happy to talk. And so Manchester United would then come back to them and say, well, we're happy to pay whatever money, so long as it's reasonable. Can we start talking to the player? That's what happens. They ask for permission. Then the player and the club start talking. They come to terms. Sancho would probably say to Man United, yes, I'm excited by the project, happy to keep this going. Or he might just say, look, I'm not interested in moving to Manchester United. Now, the fact is that all the Sancho news has been coming through means that Sancho has been interested in Manchester United and a return to the Premier League. It's pretty clear. You wouldn't have these news stories coming out if there wasn't an interest by the player.
Yeah.
Also, if there was an interest by Borussia Dortmund to sell Jadon Sancho. So the first question is, will the Premier League put restrictions? I don't think they can. There's no rules in the Premier League connected to transfer limits. The only rule connected to transfer limits is basically the adherence to FIFA's financial fair play system or UEFA's financial fair play system, right? So basically the Premier League has to agree to UEFA's underlying financial fair play system. So that's the only restriction that all clubs will still work to. The next question you asked was, can Man United afford it? Of course they can. They can afford 120 million, that's for sure, because if you look at their last accounts, they probably had about 200 or 300 million in the bank. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a lot of money.
These kind of times as well, these kind of precedented times.
I mean, think about it. Like the club's biggest expenditure is player salaries and staff salaries.
And they paid it all.
Infrastructure and other projects that they're working on. I don't think they pay rent anywhere really, because they do actually. Their head office location in London, I think, is not an owned property. They rent that. But I think Old Trafford, Manchester United own the ground, own the asset. Carrington, I think they own the asset. So, can they afford Sancho? Of course they can. Now, can they afford Sancho and a few other players? Then that's not a question of whether they can. They can, of course, but will they do it? It's probably highly unlikely. Reason being is, if you've got 300 million in the bank, you don't spend 300 million because you have to save some for a rainy day, right? So usually how clubs do this when they don't have the money, right, is they basically take a loan. There's loads of clubs. In fact, Portuguese league works heavily in this form of business. What they do is they know they're going to make X amount of TV rights revenue in the next year. And so what they do is they get funding on the back of knowing that they're going to make 50 million next year. So they borrow 30 million.
Yeah.
So they get
very risky, but
it's very risky because if you get, if results deter, Premier League media rights payments don't come through, you're in trouble, right? So Manchester United can afford Jadon Sancho. If he wants to come, I think we should definitely go for him because he's a great player. We can afford, Manchester United can afford him. My only question on Jadon Sancho is value, right? Is he worth, 120 million?
Would Dortmund want a lot of money for him because of the fact that, Dortmund are a rich club in terms of how much revenue they get and whatnot. You know what I mean? Maybe they could say, you know what, we'll take 90 million because at the end of the day, we need the money right now. We need to pay staff. We need to pay, we've got bills now. We've got, there's so much things that could go on. And maybe they just need the money.
Yeah, so I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said this in his interview with Gary Neville a few days ago. Yeah, we're going to take advantage of the situation. Now, one thing I have to say is cash is king, right? If you have money in the bank, you are in the best position because you have the ability to bargain and to call the shots on a deal, basically, right? Yeah. So the point I want to make here about Jadon Sancho or any player that Manchester United want to go is that if Man United have the money, where things are at currently with all of the leagues in Europe and in the Premier League is that there's a high possibility that these clubs are not going to get that final payment, that final 25% of TV rights revenue, right? And I'm talking across the board. I'm talking about every single league in Europe, including the Premier League. Now, if you look at, for example, Barcelona as a club, right? Barcelona, their players and staff agreed to take, what was it, a 70% hike, deduction in, reduction in salaries and wages, right? So why did they have to do this? Because
the club, maybe.
Because actually Barcelona don't really have a lot of cash in the bank.
No,
they
that's
can't.
surprising.
Barcelona do not have a lot of. They are a valuable club with player assets.
But they don't have cash.
But they don't have the liquid cash. So you can, for example, Spurs are actually quite a valuable club because of their playing assets, meaning Harry Kane, Dele Alli, Heung-min Son. These three players could net them 300 million easy.
Yeah.
In the previous market, maybe now probably 250 million. Harry Kane will fetch 80 million, no questions asked. Real Madrid.
Well, not 200 million that they're asking for.
Nah, that's ridiculous. He's not worth 200 million. He's not.
Everyone knows that.
Harry Kane is not worth 200 million. There's nothing special there worth 200 million, right?
But would United be tempted to buy maybe 120 million or 100, because they want a striker now. Oliver Solskjaer likes a striker. He likes a number 9,
Not Harry Kane for 100 million. That's my view. I like Harry Kane, but I think he's a very box standard English striker. Nothing, there's no flair there. Harry Kane does the basics and he does it really well. Credit to him. He scores goals, he gets in good positions.
Not what United need right now, though. We need a goal scorer.
We need a goal scorer, but not one for 100 million. Yeah. Not one for 100 million. We let Lukaku go for 75, 70 million, whatever it was. Lukaku was worth, I would say 60, 70 million. We paid too much for him when we bought him from Everton, right? But the point is, Harry Kane, too much. I wouldn't pay 100 million for him. Especially now, given everything with coronavirus and everything. I think Harry Kane is 80 million tops. Why? Because Harry Kane is also a bit older, right? How old is he? 27?
26, I think he is.
26, yeah. Okay, so he's got good 4 or 5 years left in him before he starts to decline, right?
Yeah.
Again, Harry Kane gets you 30 goals. I don't know. He just doesn't. He's not. I don't know if it's his personality or what. He's just not a flair player for me. I saw him in the World Cup 2018. How many goals did he score? Most of them were penalties.
Yeah, and
Kane is not a flair striker. Yeah. You just don't expect magic. He's not a player that makes things happen. He's a goal scorer. He does what he does very well, but he's not a flair player for me. He's not a fox in the box type of special player. He's really good, but not 100 million. So that's my view on him. Jadon Sancho, for sure. There's magic in that boy. I think he's young enough to pay a lot of money for. But again, I think the value is being asked at over 100 million for these players. All of this happened after the Qataris bought Neymar for 200 million. That is the thing that broke this silly price point. Because everybody started saying, oh, but if Neymar's worth 200 million euros, why? And then, of course, Barcelona then went and bought Philippe Coutinho for a ridiculous sum of money. Do you get what I'm saying? It was a ripple of one transaction that caused a serious overinflation of players. Do you understand? Like Pogba at that time was the most valuable player. I think Man United paid, before Pogba it was Gareth Bale. Before Gareth Bale it was Cristiano Ronaldo, who was the highest world record transfer fee, right? I don't think it should have gone beyond 100 million so quickly after that. Gareth Bale was also too much. He wasn't worth 90 million that they paid for him. Gareth Bale at that time was worth 60 or 70 million. He was a bloody good player, not more than Ronaldo was, for sure. So the transfer market, I think, is gonna
It's gonna
basically
explode.
it's
I
not.
think it's gonna be madness.
No, it's gonna be madness, but I think more so it's gonna be
Players' salaries, player contracts. I mean, players that contracts will end. They would have to sort out maybe a new legality where contracts then would have to be another year extension. But the managers don't want to keep Willian. Say, for example, Willian. I mean, maybe the Frank Lampard doesn't want him, and he says, you know what, I don't want you next season. But still, he's still got about 4 or 5 months of his contract still left that would carry on for the next season. So all these legalities, it's like it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into that, but they have fun.
Yeah, of course.
There are ways to get around this thing, and I know this is one of the big things that the Premier League are considering is how to treat player contracts. And I guess the players themselves lose quite a lot. Think of Ronaldo, for example, right? He is 35. He turned 35 month and a half, 2 months ago in February, and he would have been playing probably his last Euros, okay, at 35. Maybe he'll prove me wrong and play when he's 40.
He will.
I hope he will. I hope he will. But as you get older, you change, you lose speed, you lose. So every player is at loss every single year that goes on. Do you know what I'm saying? So this avoided league, avoided situation, a void year in football means players are 1 year older, right? But not necessarily 1 year further in their development, because if you haven't played or finished the league, it's going to cause problems. So, yeah, I think it's super interesting times, man. I think for me, I just want to see the end of the league, whether it's a voided league or they play it. But ultimately, my preference is that they void the league. Liverpool don't win the title, because I think if Liverpool win the title, they could probably go on and win another 1 or 2, which would.
And that's my, know what.
I'd happily take another year. I'd happily take another year in Europa League than our 20 leagues being under threat. As they say, Liverpool 18, COVID-19, and Manchester United 20. That's how the league table looks like this, right?
You know what, Sam? We're gonna end it on there. It's been a brilliant podcast. Very, very insightful. Chat about the Saudi owners and whatnot, and maybe it is a reality check of where United are at the minute. Maybe they're not really a prospect for the future. I mean, as much as we can talk about we're a big club and we were a big club, maybe Newcastle and them kind of clubs might be the future where, they've got history and they've got fan backing behind them. Maybe they could be the ones that can push into the top 4, push into challenge for one day being the league titles and whatnot.
I think that Newcastle, as I said earlier, is it's a good project for them. 300 million. It's not a lot of money for them. If you think of Mohammed bin Salman bought the Leonardo da Vinci painting for 400 million, right? 300 million is a football club with a stadium and players and all kinds of things. So, this is the kind of money we're talking about. It's cheap change for them. So the point I'm trying to make is that I think it's a good long-term project for them, something to get their fingers into. They'll definitely put money into it. You're not going to see them going for Messi or Ronaldo or crazy players. They will just have more options, more choice to buy the kind of players that they need for them. Let's not kid ourselves. All of a sudden, we're not going to get some Saul Niguez going towards Newcastle because Mohammed bin Salman decided to play fantasy football. Let's just be frank here, right? Players don't want to go to some club on a long-term project. Unless you're a really young player, possibly. But no, I don't think so. Because Newcastle...
Let's say prove themselves.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, look at a club like Man City when they first started, right?
Exactly. They got Robinho.
Yeah, they managed to get Robinho, right? That was like the first big signing into them, right? You're like, wow, why did Robinho even go to Man City? That's what Newcastle will have to try and do. And I think it's becoming increasingly difficult. Players are very shrewd nowadays. Like Jadon Sancho is saying to Man United, like, I want to play a Champions League. He doesn't care that Man United are going to pay him a lot of money. He may be able to eat it 1 year, but he wants to believe that he can play at the top level. Do you understand? Like Man City didn't get into Champions League for a few seasons before, right? Before they got into it, right? So whoever these players are that is going to help them leverage and increase their league positioning is they're going to have to be players that are either heavy for the money, coming towards the end of their careers, sort of thing. But I can't see any serious prime performer going to Newcastle tomorrow because
maybe they'll keep believing. I'm sure if any Newcastle fans are
no, they should, and because Newcastle's good for the league, man. Well, I love Newcastle fans. I love Newcastle as a club. I love what they've done. I remember those great Newcastle versus Liverpool games when Faustino Asprilla used to play for them. Against Liverpool, there were a few matches that they played 4-3 against each other a few times. Back in the days when those games were basically the ones that kind of helped Manchester United win leagues, basically. Kevin Keegan managing them. So it was exciting times, and hopefully they can get back there because I think Newcastle in the mix really adds to the dimension. Similarly to how Spurs have come up and into the mix, So I think a Newcastle in the mix really makes for interesting football, and because of the passion. Can you imagine? And for us as Manchester United fans, going to Newcastle have always been a bit of a bogey team for us. Remember, we've gone there a few times and lost. There's no guarantees whenever we go. Despite how badly they're playing, we can still lose a game in Newcastle, because they turn up on the day. Such is the rivalry, right? The other thing is, I guess, people who's going to be really pissed are the Leeds fans. As you know, Manchester United fans have massive rivalry, so they're going to be pissed off because they're also in a really big pole position to try and enter into the Premier League, right? So I know the Premier League were even thinking about having a 23 team league for next season. Do you understand? So voiding it, but giving championship teams that were in prime position to qualify into for promotion to come into the Premier League. I don't think that works. It's a bit hit and miss. The other bigger question is the European leagues, which we never really talked about. And I'll just quickly say something on that. UEFA looking at trying to find a way to complete those competitions. Again, I think it's clutching at straws. These leagues are known for their format. And if you change the format, you start to alter the definition of that season. So it will look odd in time when we look back into the 2019-2020 season. People will always say, oh, but it wasn't played as it usually was, because UEFA are considering doing a mini tournament in July, August, if it's possible. So who knows what's going to happen,
But Sam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again for coming on the channel. Again, we'll probably talk again more as the developments go on and whatnot. And you never know if there's any U-turns or whatnot. But Sam, make sure you keep yourself, sane and keep yourself preoccupied because obviously we've got another 3 weeks of this. Probably shaping into Ramadan. You never know. Absolutely. It's going to be a long overhaul. But you take care of yourself, guys. Absolutely. If you like this video,
I just want to say one last thing before I go. I just want to say, I was waiting for the Premier League footballers to jump on, and contribute to helping people, local communities and the NHS. I'm glad that they finally did with the Players Together movement. It did take a while. I understand there was a bit of issues there, but I'm hoping that they can increasingly do loads more because it's the same fans that come and support them that are the ones struggling right now with this corona situation. So hopefully, all our boys in our team are doing their little bits and pieces here and there to help the local communities and help people in need because I think it's that kind of time right now where everyone needs to look.
I think Man United have done well in terms of, the thing that they did for the NHS, and Chevrolet have done something, give ventilators and whatnot. Yeah, so Man United, for once, have done well. But Sam, thanks for your time today. Guys, if you like this video, smash the like video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, bottom right corner. And Saudis have ended their interest in Man United. And you know what? Good luck, Newcastle. Guys, take care, bye-bye, and peace.